The federal government has said by 2031, I believe it was, they're going to build 3.9 million homes. You have to build 1,528 homes per day, or 64 homes per hour for 7 years straight. Of course, this assumes, you're working 24 hours a day, no weekends off, no federal stat holidays.
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
Start recording now, Steve. Steve number 2, you good?
Steve number 2, that's me.
All right.
Yeah, baby.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Tom Storey Show, your weekly real estate roundup podcast. Thank you for being here. If you're watching us on YouTube and you have not already, make sure to subscribe. We're on the road to 5,000 subscribers. Make sure to leave this video a like if you learned anything new today. If you're listening on the audio platforms, we'll have a wonderful day. Today's guest is a return guest. Steve Saretsky has joined the show from Oakwyn Real Estate. He's the co-host of the Loonie Hour podcast. Probably one of the most followed people in Canadian real estate, I think, generally. I don't know if there's many other people than you. So thank you for being back here, man. What's going on?
Man, a second appearance. What an honor.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you back. I think we certainly have some topics that will be fun to discuss today. The budget made a lot of headlines, and I've never seen so many, let's put it this way, so many Canadians that are typically quiet about things publicly make statements in my friend group saying that they don't agree with what's going on. I thought that was interesting. Even people that are like very liberal. Have you kind of seen that as well, where it's like, regardless of side here, people aren't really that happy?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, maybe not as much. I don't know, but I try to like stay out of the politics stuff, but even I was like having a tough time, like holding back punches. It was, it's a big change. I think it's a big change.
So we'll get to that in depth. I know that will be probably the bulk of today's conversation, but let's start on the real estate side of things. So you serve the Vancouver market. What's your experience been like so far in 2024?
And it's been weird. It's just, there's no rhyme or reason. Coming into this year, right? Like the hope or the excitement was rate cuts, and everyone's like, well, the Bank of Canada, I think it was going to cut like 6 times. And so everyone's like, well, I got to front run the Bank of Canada. And at the same time, there was like zero inventory. And so like we started sort of like the market picked back up. We started seeing multiple offers. I think people actually started overpaying. And then, kind of in the last few weeks, obviously like, hey, rates are trending back up again, at least on the fixed rate side. And we've started finally getting some inventory, and it feels like the wind has kind of been sucked out. So it's just a weird market. Like the detached market's been, entry-level detached has been very strong all of this year. Whereas like, you look at the condo market, particularly in the downtown core, that's struggled, and it's just still hasn't recovered since the pandemic. And so, it's tough because it's just hard to like, how do you price things, what to expect, when you're working with clients, it's hard to give them a straight answer these days.
It's really interesting because everything you just said completely lines up with exactly what's happening in Toronto. All the price growth we've seen is happening with freehold properties. The detached sector is doing very well. Where the condo market, which interestingly enough, I did the math the other day, out of every listing currently on the market in the city of Toronto, like actually Toronto, almost 70% of active listings was condo ownership. So it's like, we talk about, okay, yeah, inventory's here. It's like, well, inventory's here if you want a condo. And our experience have been the same, but then Steve in Surrey, you're like the opposite, which is odd. Like, why are you so much different?
Yeah, I don't know. Detached is flooding. It's flooding to the market really in a big way. I don't know what's driving it, because we're not getting, the crazy part is like my personal inventory of listings has not increase. So these are people that are coming to the market just kind of spattering listings. We're not really seeing as much of kind of the geo farming type folks that we used to. So it's a really weird mix. It's tough to like phone up the guy that's from that area and be like, why did 6 listings come on right in that spot where it used to be listed by maybe one guy? And now it's kind of spattered all over. So it's a really tough read to get that. But our condo market seems to be pretty good.
I was going to ask, like, Steve, the condo market there. I was just curious, like, on the investment side, because one of the most common calls that I'm getting is, "Hey, I've got this investment property. I've held it. I've had it for whatever 3 years, 4 years, 7 years, and it's like, I was cash flow positive a couple $100 a month. Now I'm losing $700 a month, $800. Pick your number." I've had people call me saying, "Hey, I'm losing $1,200 a month," and it's like, how long can you carry this? So really, and obviously the tenancy laws in BC, you can't raise the rent. So you're kind of stuck and you can't really get the tenant out. So basically the decision for a lot of them is just to sell. And so I think that's why, in my opinion, the condo market, we've seen more inventory and less demand, right? Because like we lost a lot of the investors. The investors aren't buying today. The people that are buying are the end users. So I don't know if I was just curious if that was happening, if you're seeing that in Surrey, but.
No, not. I mean, we did have a lot of investors buying with a negative cash flow of $300, $400, $500 a month, and they were happy with that because they viewed it as kind of like their RSP contribution. But now that that's $700, $800, $900, $1,100 a month, yeah, there's investors are just not interested in that type of burn.
Your comment there should get the YouTube comments going.
Oh, the YouTube comments would be great.
Negative 500 a month. That'll get people fired up.
Steve gets the people going in the comments. He says something every episode that definitely gets them going. We found it weird. We're like, you'd think the cheaper stuff I'm putting on the market in terms of like entry level condos is taking me a long time to sell. We're like the bigger, older buildings that actually have very high maintenance fees but are good floor plans, I'm selling in like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And you think like
you're going to end users, basically.
That's exactly it, because those, especially the junior 1 beds where it doesn't have a defined bedroom, the only people buying those were investors, and they don't exist right now, and they're just sitting. Like percentage wise of them moving, the inventory is crazy right now. It's like 6-7 months of inventory for these tiny condos, and I'm sure you're seeing this Vancouver too. There was I don't know how often you were coming to Toronto before the pandemic, Steve, but there was a pretty famous bar downtown called Croc Rock. And anyone that listens to the show will know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyways, it's becoming a condo now like everything else. And there's a unit starting at 275 square feet.
Wow. That's kind of depressing. It's like Hong Kong.
It's like someone in my office used to say for pre-con like years ago, he's like, why don't you just go to jail? It's about the same size, but you get a few meals every single day. Like in terms of the space that you're living.
Yeah.
Well, we saw it here. So we've had, I think it might have been Concord that launched it, which is, I think, Piano. And I was looking at the prices and I'm like, wow, like has the market come down that much? And then I look at the floor plan and it was a 581 square foot 2-bed. And they're advertising the deck space, which is 200 square feet, as being this big positive. I don't know if you're going to toss the kids out on the deck on the 21st floor or what you're going to do, but like the fact that they can try and market a 2-bedroom in hotel room style space, like this is going to be a tough sell moving forward. And what we're seeing here in my particular neighborhood is we're seeing some infill lots, and these detached homes that they're building aren't that much bigger than the stuff that's available. That's say 10 or 20 years old. They might be 5,000 square foot homes, but they're asking $3 million for them. And you can get a 4,000 square foot home that's 20 years old for 1.6 to 1.8. So I don't know how those guys are ever going to sell that brand new infill stuff, given what's going on right now.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just a weird market, right? Like, like in Vancouver, the entry level segment's pretty hot because you have all these young families that need space, but like they're also competing with builders because builders are still out there building. Like with the new zoning changes, like we rezoned basically most of the city to allow duplex, like multiplex stuff, triplexes and things of that nature. So like builders are still out there acquiring and building that product. It's funny because like that's the product that's still getting like actively built today. Mm-hmm. Whereas like, if you're trying to like pre-sell, a condo high rise or even concrete mid rise in the city, like pre-sales are non-existent and those projects aren't getting off the ground. So it's interesting, right? Like it's in terms of like the supply that's even able to get built in this like high rate environment, high cost of construction. It's just, yeah, it's very segmented, right? I think we're just used to like this market that like it just trends in one direction, which is like, oh, it's all going up and to the right, or like, hey, the whole market's moving down. It's not like that.
So basically, the only inventory they're building in Vancouver and Surrey is $3 million houses. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that that's what's actually coming to the market? That will help, right? Long term.
I mean, it's crazy though to think like, okay, so I was like, if I wanted to move from my house to just that brand new house and get like an extra bedroom or maybe an extra rec room downstairs, I have to take on a $6,500 a month payment, more than what I'm currently paying. Like that just, it's impossible. It doesn't make sense. So none of those homes have sold. So I'm very interested to see the $1 million difference for not that much space.
I wonder what the build quality is on those.
Some of them actually look really good, and I'm waiting to see the other. Like one of them is absolutely stunningly beautiful, but you can end up in a much better neighborhood in the same size house for the same price. So I don't understand why you would buy here.
Steve,
but I bought here, so I don't know.
We had your housing minister on our show a few weeks ago. We had Ravi on, and I thought Surrey Steve did a good job at kind of grilling him on a few things. I'd be curious now that that's all in effect and they're moving forward and they are not stopping. What's your opinion on? I mean, there's a list of 15 changes they made. What's your opinion on everything that's been happening?
I mean, I think in general, most of it's pretty good policy. Like it's kind of needed. I mean, like the fact that like in the city of Vancouver, where obviously I work and live, it's like, I don't know what the stat is, but it's like 70% of the land is zoned single family. And it's like that the dirt alone for a standard 33-foot wide lot starts at $2 million. Like,
wow.
It's just, you know what I mean? It's just bizarre. Like this is not attainable like long term, and so it's like the fact that we have single family houses in Vancouver that are like a 6-minute drive to downtown in the core. It's like, really? Like, I don't know, you go to any other like major metro and like you're not getting a single family house 6 or 7 minutes outside of the downtown core. So I think that's just going to change over time. I think the whole push is higher density. So like I said, I think like the general public, I think, is aware of this too, where it's like, and that's why I think there's just like, hey, yeah, buy dirt, buy a house. Like, and I think that's also like really helping support those prices.
What do you think of the short-term rental ban? This episode of the Tom Storey Show is brought to you by Realty Ninja. Hey, real estate agents, I bet you didn't get into the real estate industry to try to become a web developer. Realty Ninja will help you build a beautiful website for your business without becoming all techie, because me and Steve are certainly not techie. They'll set up your entire site for you, they'll migrate the content from your current site, and they'll take care of all the back end, switching the domains, all the things that you don't want to do, they'll take care of for you. Their team of in-house designers will make your new site match your current brand and help you stand out from your competitors. Best of all, Realty Ninja offers a free unlimited trial that lets you build out your website, and they do not charge you until you're ready to launch. That's right, they're so confident in their product and that you're gonna love the website that you build with them. They will not charge you until it's ready to launch. They don't even take your credit card details. Listeners of the Tom Storey Show will not only get an unlimited trial before you launch, but if you go to realtyninja.com/Tom, you will get 20% off your first year after you launch. A beautiful, functional, and professional website is absolutely a must in today's real estate landscape, and Realty Ninja delivers. So go to realtyninja.com/Tom for 20% off your first year. That's realtyninja.com/Tom. And now back to the podcast. What do you think of the short-term rental ban?
I think it's I genuinely believe this, and like I know like I think the general public is like, oh, I think Airbnb is like not a big issue at all in Vancouver.
I agree.
And then like people will get really upset about that, but it's there was actually some stats out there I was looking at. I don't have them handy, but like you look at the overall number of units that are actually on Airbnb compared to the big market. and it's such a small portion. So like people think that with this Airbnb stuff that all these units are going to go back onto the market and it's going to like flood the inventory and prices are going to, and like it's just not going to happen.
Couldn't you then?
Yeah.
Couldn't you look at that though and then say it's such a small portion? Why did they have to do this then? If it wasn't really making any difference, why did they have to ban them?
I mean, it's just politics, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
right.
it's such an easy, it's
Yeah.
like everything today. I mean, like literally, like we had a policy advisor on our podcast yesterday. It's like he's just like, yeah, this is not like an economic like a lot of the policies that are being put out are not economic policies. They're just like they're policies to get reelected. It's like let's go take consumer sentiment polls and let's read the room. And if people like this, like in BC, right? Like here's the thing. And again, not to get overly political, but like everything is going towards the wealth taxes. It's the divide between the rich and the poor, and governments are basically leaning into that. Like in BC, we brought in like the speculation tax. What is that? It's really just a wealth tax. The school tax, same thing. The federal government coming out a couple days ago saying, capital gains increase. Again, it's just they're just playing to that base. And so I think that's the same thing with the Airbnb stuff. It's like, hey, listen, rents are up, 15% a year. Like it can't be because of any of our policies or how we're managing the economy. It must be because Airbnb. And so, yeah, that's my view.
It's funny. We had Doug Porter on from BMO, and we asked him like, what's it like to be in a meeting with like the federal government? Like he's sitting there with Chrystia and like advising her, and he's like, they don't. I was shocked he was so honest with
He gave us a real answer. Yeah,
he was like,
yeah, what did he say?
They don't ask. They listen to us, but for the sole purpose of seeing how they can. They've already made a decision, how they can spin that for political gain. So he's like they've already decided what they're doing before they come into the meeting, and they just want to hear our feedback so they know how to push it out to the public. And I was like, I can't believe like
it's a one-way conversation.
Yeah, it's a totally one-way conversation. They just want to know how to politically make it play correctly.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know. I've had a couple of meetings in the last couple of weeks with like immigration minister and the housing minister at the federal level. Mm-hmm. And I went to these conversations and I was like, man, like what do these guys want? Like, is this like a sting? Like, are these guys like, they see me on Twitter and they're like, we got you. Like, and so I was kind of like went in there. I was like, I wasn't really sure what this is all going to be about. And so we just kind of just like had this conversation and like really like nothing happened. Like it seemed like there was like no point of the meeting other than like, hey, let's try to like make Steve feel like we're listening to him. Let's kind of like buddy up with him a little bit, and maybe he'll stop tweeting, negative comments or writing about us in his news. Like I felt like that was the takeaway. I was like, man, these guys don't care what I have to say.
How did they reach out to you?
Just direct email.
Interesting.
Crazy.
Yeah, direct email from like one of their assistants.
But did you just sit down and they start asking you questions, or was it just like, why am I here? What are we doing?
Kinda, yeah. It was just like it was really weird, and like I had a phone call with Sean Fraser. And it was like 15 minutes long, and it was like just after they dropped like the budget around like housing and stuff, and yeah, and then he like kind of like rushed off the phone, and it was just like, what was the point of this call? Like
you should have said, I'll talk to you if you come on our podcast.
Yeah, I don't know, man. So I just feel like so we asked on our podcast yesterday, a guy named Robert Azalin. He used to be the economic advisor to Bill Morneau when he was finance minister. So I was like, how do these meetings work? You guys are setting budgets. Like what happens? Like, and I was like, who's setting the budget? Is it Freeland? Is it Trudeau? Like, how does this work? And he's like, listen, like, I think it's basically, he's like, from my experience, he's like, it's JT that's calling the shots. Freeland is just kind of like along for the ride. And he's like, yeah, the reality is like they pick up the phone, they have weekly meetings with the NDP and say, hey, listen, are you okay with this? Are you not okay with that? What can we get you on board with? Keep the coalition going. And yeah, it's just fascinating, like the world of politics, because it's like I don't think they're setting policy for the best of Canadians. I think they're setting policy to get reelected.
I think we all kind of agree on that. Were you always this interested in politics, or was it getting into real estate that made you interested in politics?
I think not particularly. Like I honestly, like I hate politics because it's just like such a stupid, dirty game. Like, and people are like, you should get into politics. I'm like, I don't think. Like, I think you can actually have more impact and more change outside of politics, like through like media, like what we're doing today.
That's interesting.
But I think what's happened is like housing is so political. Not that like how you want it to be, but like zoning's all political. It's like NIMBYism, boomers that are wealthy don't want density in their neighborhood. That's all like, they shake hands with the mayor and like, even like developers, right? Like how do you get some of these density bonuses? All like who it's political. So like housing in and itself is political, right? Like, and so I think it's kind of come with me being like a spokesperson on the housing market, that politics have coincided with that.
I would say at least like listening to this, if I was just like someone sitting at home, I kind of follow this along. Maybe I'm following you on Twitter and I hear like, oh, they actually reached out to Steve to ask him some questions. At least they know you exist. They're watching. They see that you and other people like you that have an audience. That at least I would say maybe that's encouraging, that they acknowledge, they don't just dismiss it.
Yeah, I mean it's cool. Like I read a weekly Substack newsletter, and I get to see all the emails that are subscribed.
Right.
So it's interesting. Like there's people from the Bank of Canada, there's people from government and Liberal Party, Conservative Party. So it's like people are out there listening. So I feel like there's definitely more responsibility to have like really dialed in content, factual, and I'm willing to, at the same time state your opinion, because, I do hope that there is the odd person out there that is reading it and can hopefully shape better policy.
I see your face on my Instagram feed. Other people just share your stuff all day long. It's crazy. Like the reach you have.
Yeah, stories and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, just they screenshot your tweets, and I'm going through, like, I'm not even on Twitter anymore, but I see you on Instagram on other people's stories, just sharing what you've said.
I was gonna say, because I'm not very active on Instagram, so it was just that's good to know. Might be
you got advocates just posting it for you. Question: have either of you filled up your car with gas in the last week?
What's gas? What's gas in Toronto?
I think it was 175 this morning.
Man, Steve, I drive a Tesla. I'm not like a big, EV environment guy, but I was just like, this is a cool car. Seems practical. I actually hated paying for gas when, as a realtor, you're driving around all the time. But like Steve, what's the gas is what, like 210 here?
Yeah, 214 yesterday.
Yeah,
it's disgusting. It's crazy.
That feels like it's probably going higher too.
Next year we're going to get another crank up, another 8-9 cents per liter. It's insanity, but hey, that's what we got to do to save the planet.
I never really, like, for a very long time, maybe it was me being naive, or just I enjoyed everything about Canada. I loved living here. I'm happy I was born here. More recently with some healthcare stuff, like we had an appointment the other day at the hospital. It was nothing like bad or anything. It was scheduled. I waited probably almost an hour and a half. Got there on time, waited an hour and a half, took my full afternoon. The lady beside me was just burping loudly. That's not their fault, but it was just had a really bad experience. And I was like, what's going on? Does just nobody give a shit? Like, I just feel like, and I don't know if you even said this on the podcast, like I grew up in a family that was very liberal, right? I voted liberal and conservative in my life, but I just feel like there seems to be something going on where it is different these days. And I'm starting to understand the frustration of Surrey Steve, who's been telling me this for years, and maybe Vancouver Steve, what you feel that you voice your opinion, but you try to keep it, not super political. But there just seems to be like this country divide right now where a lot of people just aren't happy. And I've never really seen this in Canada.
It just feels like the taxes keep going up, which is like, hey, great, happy to pay more taxes, but like, what am I getting for it? This is like by almost every measure, it feels like you're getting less or worse service, right? Like the hospitals are longer, like everything. It's just like, you try to get a passport now and it's like this huge ordeal. It's like nothing feels like better. It feels like things are getting worse. And you're like, what, like, why? What am I getting for this?
And also all the taxes, like when I hear the word like wealthy, in my mind, this might be my own opinion. I feel like there's people that are like do okay. There's people that are poor. There's people that are rich, and then there's people that are wealthy. To me, wealthy is like the highest bracket of that. It feels like most of these taxes aren't actually going after the wealthy. They're going after the middle class. Like it seems to be, and I feel like all the people that even were leaning very far left are now saying like, well, what the hell? I'm not wealthy. Sure, I had an investment property, but it was because I was trying to get further ahead in life, and I just feel attacked. Maybe I'm speaking for myself right now, but are you?
Well, yeah, like I don't know. I just chat with like clients that are like doctors and stuff, and just I'm telling you, this is pretty frequent. This isn't like a one-off where it's like
right.
Doctor clients that they're younger, but like they put in their time. They are making like higher incomes, right? So let's just say it's a doctor making $400,000. Okay, well, you're paying 50% of taxes. So you're only taking $200,000 home. An average, very like crappy detached house is like $2 million, and so it's like, and it's like you know how hard it is to save, even as a doctor that's making $400,000, but only taking home $200,000 after taxes, and then paying $5,000 a month for their rent. And so not really that much actually left over to save. It's a very expensive city to live in, but people assume, well, doctors, you're top 1% tax bracket, you must be wealthy. Like I got doctor clients leaving, because they can't get into like a house that they're happy in, and so they're actually like literally like I got one guy, he's leaving, he's going to Australia, he's gone.
Oh, he's leaving the country, not just Vancouver.
Yeah. I've had doctor clients leaving the country as well. They're just like, I'm packing up early. They should have another 5, 10, 15 years on their career. And they're like, nope, cashing it all out. Done.
If you are a real estate agent in Ontario, you know all about TRESA and Rico's information guide, but your clients don't. So we are excited to introduce you to TRESAvideo.ca. It's a dynamic tool designed to help you simplify the complexities of TRESA while explaining Rico's information guide to your clients. TRESA Video is more than just a visual aid. It's a strategic investment in your brand's integrity and your client's education. Tom and his team use their own custom branded video that they purchased from TRESAvideo.ca in communications with their clients. Simply embed a link in your email signature, upload your video to YouTube, place it on your website, share it via text, or integrate your custom branded video into email campaigns using any CRM. Check out TRESAvideo.ca or click the link below. Quickly upload your branding and instantly elevate your trust and transparency with your clients. That's TRESAvideo.ca. TRESA video.ca.
So I just wanted to pull on that thread because I had some lady that I don't know, random lady today on Twitter, and sometimes I like getting into it with people, and so you talk about this. So she everyone's like talking about this like new capital gains tax increase, right? So she tweets, she says, if you earn $350,000 because you're a doctor, you're saving lives and doing real productive work, you pay $140,000 in taxes. Then she says, but if you buy an investment property, do literally nothing, and then you sell it for $350,000 more than you paid for it, you only pay $55,000 in taxes. So she's basically presuming this is why the capital gains increase is productive. To which I responded, the majority of those doctors are incorporated entities. They make no pension. They're incorporated. They're private corporations, which means they're going to be paying higher taxes on all of their investments, aka their retirement savings are all going to be taxed with this new higher capital gains tax bracket. So it was like you basically just played yourself in this whole tweet. Like this is the problem, is like people read these headlines of like, oh, it only impacts 0.13% of the population. It's like, no, it doesn't.
It also only impacts the biggest, best and most contributing, let's say, companies, for instance, they're saying, okay, we have to go after a company like Bell for their profits. Cool. Bell's already struggling, guys. So now we're going to tax them as much as we possibly can to make them lay off even more people. Something weird happens here with this whole business tax thing. You think I'm going to get the money from that greedy company and we're going to tax them more. But what happens is you start losing jobs when you tax them more. You start disincentivizing them. Maybe they pick up and leave. Elon did that with Tesla, right? Moved to a completely different state to get out of there. But then you actually start collecting less tax because now you just have less companies paying less tax. So lowering the tax rate on companies actually can do a much more productive thing of gaining more tax revenue.
It's actually like, it's actually labeled and outlined in the federal budget. It actually shows the revenues from the increased capital gains actually basically goes to like zero net gain in like 3 years from now. So like all the juice that they're going to squeeze from this is actually in the first year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
And then which afterwards it basically goes down to zero. So
it all dries up.
Yeah.
Now, if a group of realtors get together and argue against this new capital gain change over 250, we're going to get laughed at. However, if a group of doctors gets together, I think they could actually meaningfully make an impact here. Do you think if the doctors all band together and say, this is enough, this is crazy, or they'll just get their portion taken out of it and nothing else will change?
Well, that's why I'm trying. I mean, truthfully, that's why I'm like, listen, guys, like this is doctors, it's dentists, it's RMTs, it's physiotherapists. And just to clarify, because people, again, general public, people that I see like applauding this stuff haven't actually read past the headlines, which is, again, so if you're a doctor earning it through a corporation, you don't get the 250K exemption. So it's on the full thing. There's no, so the 250K. Yeah. This is like,
oh my God.
So the 250K capital gains sort of exemption or whatever is only for individuals. But if you're a corporation, so you're like, Dr. Fred Smith, and Dr. Fred Smith earns through his corporation. He then has a holding company. Through that holding company, he invests. He has a stock portfolio that's under Dr. Fred Smith Holding Co. Any profit is immediately taxed at that higher capital gains inclusion rate. So it's not, he doesn't get the first 250K. It's like, hey, listen, if he has a 10K capital gains that year, the full $10,000. So yeah, I think it's substantial. And to say that it's only going to impact like the elite of the elite is just like, it's so insane.
I'm going to point something out here, Tom, because I always have this argument and in the comments quite regularly, because the NDP is doing the same thing. They say this person's greedy. Those corporations are greedy. That landlord is hogging homes. They're greedy, right? The comments down below this will say, if you own more than one home, you're greedy. Cool. I get that. I'm going to spin that to what I think it is. I think that if you're calling someone else greedy, that's identifying the actual greedy person. That's the person identifying that I should have more for doing nothing, and that person shouldn't have as much as they have for what they've worked for, right? That's almost even worse than greed. It's envy. And it's actually, they're talking about, this is where I'm going to get in trouble, Tom. They're talking about stealing people's money, right? And it's all taxation is. And let me point out why I think that way. Jagmeet, the guy that's holding off an election to get his pension, in my estimation.
No, that's 100% true.
That's 100% what he's doing. He's going to make $2.5 million in his pension for his life. So he's screwing the rest of Canada for $2.5 million. He's the one calling everybody else greedy. He's also the only guy that I've seen flaunting a $25,000 Rolex, rolling in a $2,000 suit. He's not flogging that Rolex and giving it to the working class, right? That guy is, in my estimation, his way of being is as terrible of a politician as you can get. because he is saying he's working for the people, and he is the greediest of them all. And what he's saying is, I need more of their money to redistribute to all of you people, while he has all this beautiful jewelry and he's flaunting himself around.
Can I just add one thing?
Not that far off these days. Justin likes to fly into Vancouver to eat at Vidges every 2 weeks or so on his government-funded private jet, right? So, I mean, I don't know what the carbon tax bill is on that and if he's getting a rebate on it, but I'm assuming that's probably not on him.
I just want to share one thing, a non-political statement. At least if he got that Rolex at retail, it's probably worth double what he paid for it. So he's buying an asset that goes up in value. So at least
he claims it when he sells it on his capital gains. Do you think he's going to claim that? I also wonder how many Rolexes he has. Just wondering.
Well, it's funny because like it seems like we've just discovered in the last 12 months. It feels like we just discovered corporate greed. Like it feels like people suddenly just got greedy. Everyone just got greedy. Like we didn't have greed 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago. It's just this new phenomenon where everybody's greedy.
You know who's going to solve the greed though? The government, who is the biggest corporation of them all that has no one to answer to. That's the people that are going to solve it.
Oh man. You know what's crazy on the housing stuff too? I feel like they brought in a lot of like pretty, like, I'll give them credit. Like they really, really screwed the file for the last 9 years, but like policies that they brought in the last like couple months have been like actually pretty good. Like, you know, the GST removal on rental buildings, the pushing provinces and municipalities to adopt, fourplex by right and basically baiting them with cash. Like a lot of these are actually, to be honest, a lot of them are stealing part of Paul Yev's plans and part of David Eby's plans at the BC government. So like none of their thought is necessarily original, but like the increased GST stuff, the increased capital gain stuff actually is counterintuitive to what they're trying to do, which is like everything they've been trying to do is to enhance and create more supply. But then the very investment dollars that you require to build real estate, you're punishing. So like, think about this is like, if like in Vancouver and Toronto, the way the system works is developer, in order to build new construction, has to pre-sell, 60% of a building. Yeah. And the reality is the end users don't absorb that product because they don't want to wait 4 years for the construction to finish. So that predominantly sells to investors. And meanwhile, you're taking more money out of investor pockets and you're discouraging them from actually investing in that new construction. And this comes at a time when like investors are already like they're already shifted to the sidelines. And you're seeing all these developments, like housing starts are rolling over, and it is going to get worse on the new housing start.
No, Steve, this is where you're totally wrong. You're totally wrong, because we are going to build 3.9 gazillion houses in the next 6 weeks.
Do you have that math on the top of your head? I saw you tweet about that. It was how many? Do you know what it was? Yeah, exactly.
So for people that are listening, so the federal government has said by 2031, I believe it was, they're gonna build 3.9 million homes, which by that math, basically the all-time record high for new housing completions is 274,000 homes, which was set back in the 1970s. 274,000 homes in a single year. That was an all-time record high. In order to hit 3.9 million homes, you have to double that. So you have to do more, double 274,000, and you have to do that for 7 straight years at a time when interest rates are at their highest levels in 20 years. The cost of construction is, enormous, and the economic outlook does not look good. So, like I said, my view is they won't hit 2 million, let alone 4.
Wasn't it like something like 50 homes per hour or something, or like some crazy number? Crazy. Like the math, like 60 something, 64 homes per hour. over the
Yeah,
next
it's
7
amazing.
years
Read
would
it
have
up,
to.
break it down. Come on, show me,
I'll read
show
it
me the
for you.
math.
It's that's why I love Chat GPT. So you put it in the Chat GPT.
Oh,
there. So
nice.
you have to build 1,528 homes per day, or 64 homes per hour, for 7 years straight. Of course, this assumes you're working 24 hours a day, no weekends off, no federal stat holidays. So that's the math behind 3.9 million homes in 7 years.
Do you think we're just heading towards, again, like I don't want to be totally pessimistic this entire episode. It's just all this stuff is yeah, Steve. Yeah. Well, one of us does. But are we just heading towards a renter nation? I know we've all said that for a long time, but it really does feel like even the government houses, it's purpose-built rentals they're building for us.
But they're going to open government land that you can lease off of the government. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the home ownership rate will continue to
It's going to go down, right?
Yeah. I mean, my biggest thesis, this is just like my personal thesis, is I think that housing doesn't trade like shelter anymore. It's just an asset class. I think it's more a reflection of decades of currency debasement. People are just looking to basically store money and store a source of value, of wealth, right? Like, I mean, it sounds like almost tinfoil hat, but I was like, if you look at you take Vancouver real estate prices, which everyone say, wow, they've gone crazy in like the last 20 years, right? Like it's been unbelievable, like 10% growth per year for 20 years. But if you actually denominate the prices in ounces of gold, it's actually gotten cheaper. Like, again, nobody's obviously buying real estate in gold, but like, let's be honest. Like, I think it's just showing you there's been this debasement, right? I mean, think about it, right? Like 30 years ago, you could have 4 kids on one income and you'd have a pretty decent sized ranch or bungalow. Today it's like you have to have both people working. Yeah, and you probably can't afford a house, but you might be able to squeeze into a 2-bedroom condo. And best case scenario, you might have 1, maybe 2 kids because that's all you can afford. So, like, to me, it's telling you right there. I just think this has been this debasement. So, long story short, is I feel that housing has become an asset class, and people don't buy off of incomes anymore. Like in Vancouver specifically, nobody's like, oh, I'm saving for the next 15 years for my down payment. It's like, no, like you're already in the market. Your parents gift you $500,000. That's your down payment. And then you take a decent sized mortgage and you're in the market and you have a very, honestly, modest income. Like people aren't saving money for down payments. They're getting it through other assets that they've accumulated.
I put out a video recently because I was just so sick of all the people. Listen, all 3 of us, everybody uses clickbait to a certain extent to get people to show up on their videos. But there's a certain segment. It's a pretty easy formula these days, right? It's like be super negative, tell people things they want to hear. Your channel will grow. Like we all know who I'm kind of talking about.
Yeah,
right. There's a few.
Me last week.
Yeah. We all do it once in a while. It's the people that are consistently doing it and just spitting out hot garbage. But anyways, I went on this full rant video. I was actually surprised how positive all the comments were. There's a few people in there that no matter what anyone says will never change their mind. But someone in the comments was like, I came to Canada 9 years ago. I had a crappy car. I worked my ass off. I bought my first property here, my second property here, my third property here. And it actually got like a ton of likes, the comment. I was like, I gave it a channel heart or whatever it's called when you like it. And then the comments below it were like, you didn't accomplish anything. Like, you're just lucky. Like, no matter what, even if it's a success story. And then someone started going like, you're the problem with our country. You immigrate. I'm like, dude, I'm not having this in my comments. Like, you're out of here. But
yeah,
man, like no matter what, people are just furious about real estate. Even if you did it the right way, they're going to say, no, you didn't do it the right way. You're lying.
Do you need insurance? The answer to that question is obviously yes, of course you do. Whether you are a tenant, landlord, or homeowner, you need to insure your property and belongings. And when I insure my investment property, personally, I choose Square One. Square One is affordable online insurance for everyone. If you apply for your Square One insurance policy using the link in the description of the show notes, listeners of the Tom Storey Show can receive $20 off right now, simply by going to squareone.ca/the Tom Storey Show. Square One is no joke. I personally use Square One for my landlord policy on my investment condo. I picked Square One because they were easier to work with than other insurance companies. And when I had an issue with my previous policy coverage in relation to my Strata's coverage, Square One was the insurance company that came up with a solution for my insurance problem at an affordable rate. Online quotes take less than 5 minutes with Square One. Get your home insurance quote today at squareone.ca/the Tom Storey Show and save $20.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's kind of like a losing battle, right? I mean, people just, I get it, right? I mean, it's like you've priced out an entire generation and everybody's just looking for people to blame and pull down, right? So yeah,
you
it's
guys
a
see-
it's a losing battle.
I think it was like a month ago now, but that RCMP report about like if Canadians get really mad about everything going on, they might actually come together and it might start riots. Did you hear anything about that?
It's called political unrest. That's exactly what happens.
No, but like I've truthfully had this view for like 5-6 years at least, which is like it's going into space of larger wealth divides and very fringe politics, which is like we're seeing it right through all these taxes, empty homes tax, speculation tax. Like the BC speculation tax literally is just like you own a second home, you own a cottage in Penticton. Oh, you only use it 4 months a year. You're going to pay the BC government 1% of the annual value every year. That's all it is. So it's like literally like we've had clients. It's like, they've had long careers, they've been successful. They own their primary residence in Vancouver and they own a vacation home they use in Kelowna and they use it, obviously during the summer, maybe a little bit over Christmas, but because they're not, utilizing it for 6 months of the year, the BC government says, hey, you're a speculator. We're taxing you. Like that's it. All that is just, it's just a wealth tax. And I mean, I think it's just a shame that.
But are those people even wealthy? Or are they just better off than most? I guess there's a weird line.
Totally.
There.
It just depends on what you define as, they're better off. Like they've been successful. I wouldn't call them rich. They're not rich people. They are, I don't know, what do you call them? Wealthy, relatively successful. Yeah.
If you own 2 properties, you're in a certain percentage of the total population that would put you in a little zone that you'd be better off than most, but I wouldn't say you'd be rich or wealthy. Yeah. For the most part.
I don't know. It's interesting just to see, like, I've had clients that have been like from like very, very, very modest means. I had one guy that was like, he was a court marshal, like, the people like stand in court and, he was like a court sheriff. And I don't know. So I was like, man, what is this? Like, what was this guy's like peak earnings? Like, I don't know, like 80 grand maybe, like at best. And but he was just like, I mean, he was smart enough, I guess, at the time, or like lucky that he was born in that era where like, he bought a couple of detached houses in Vancouver back in like the 1980s. And, they obviously inflated to these giant sums. And, he did really well. But I was like, I don't know, is this guy rich? Like, he bought like 2 or 3 houses back in the 80s and they inflated and he made several millions of dollars. But like, is he a bad person? I don't know. Is he bad? Is he a bad guy?
Don't think so.
That, though. I'm starting to see people that are just kind of like getting their heads above water, right? So my age group, 40 to 50 years old, people are like paid down their mortgages. They're starting to do good. They're starting to feel like they're doing good. And then I'm starting to hear comments like, I can't believe how much, now that I'm doing good, I can't believe how much tax I have to pay. because they haven't yet paid that tax because they were so young and not making as much. So people that were, for instance, putting in basement suites, and they're like, oh, the income tax on this almost isn't worth the basement suite. There's a couple things I'm seeing, actually. I have heard people talking about, because of things like income tax, they're talking about getting rid of their rental suites. Think about that. And the other crazy one, this is the
Wait,
crazy
say that again?
There's a few people that are looking to get rid of their basement suites just because of the cost of what the tax implications look like at the end of the year. Like if they're claiming their tax, there's a lot of people that don't claim their tax, right? But the craziest one I'm starting to see, Tom, and this is ludicrous, is I have now talked to, I think, 3 separate people who have homes that are 1985 or older, which here in BC, you could still have a wood burning fireplace, and they are starting to heat their homes with wood.
Just to save cost?
Yeah.
Hmm.
How does that help our environment?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I want to pull on that thread a little bit. I'm finding now too with like the city of Vancouver is because like the permit costs are like becoming ridiculous, which is like, hey, as soon as you spend over, I think $80,000, it triggers like it can trigger like infrastructure upgrades, and then I think as soon as you do a reno, I think north of 250,000, which, like, to be honest, like $250K doesn't actually get you that much. You have to rip out your entire heating system. So you have to rip out your gas and electrify it. Right. So you're ripping out your gas furnace to put an electric heat pump. Like, so you just like, so we're finding is like more and more people saying, I am not pulling permits.
Yep.
And so like, I think what happens is like the government taxes and fees at some point just get so egregious that people just start saying, I'm not declaring this.
No.
I've got my basement rental income. I'm not declaring that income.
Not declaring it. And I mean, I live in Surrey, land of no permits, right? Like nothing we do here is done with permits. Nobody legalizes a basement suite. Nobody builds their deck with a permit because I had one guy, he built a 10 by 15 woodworking shop in the backyard, and you're not allowed to build bigger than 10 by 10 without a permit. So he built a 10 by 15. It took him a year. They made him recertify all of his heating because the house had a uncertified air conditioner. They made him take down the like awning in the backyard that he had to like sit outside in the rain because the site coverage was too much. Like just ridiculous things. And it cost him $30,000. I'm like, I would have just put that thing in the backyard and, beg for forgiveness if the city ever finds you, which, by the way, they won't ever find you because they're not looking for you. So you are creating this thing where you've got a bunch of unsafe homes. You should see. I'm going to get into this on a future episode, Tom, but I recently rented out my basement suite again to a new tenant, and you should see.
Greedy landlord over here.
Or comparables. When I was shopping for comparables, the stuff that I saw being advertised as living accommodation.
Yeah, because you guys don't put rentals on MLS, so you can't actually. Is it hard to find comparables when you're trying to rent out your own basement? Yeah. Right?
Craigslist.
Really?
Facebook.
You go Craigslist? I go like, I always go on like Pad Mapper.
Pad Mapper, yeah.
Which I think just scrapes Craigslist.
It does.
Exactly. You know what? Realtors in Toronto, they use Pad Mapper to put up lease listings that aren't theirs just to get someone to reach out for them to get a tenant to try to earn business. It's like this whole ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of greasy.
Ridiculous thing. Sorry.
I was going to say just on that basement suite stuff, I'm also finding like, again, just coming back to like the government regulations where it's like you push it so far like in one direction. I've had a lot of conversations recently with people that have said, hey, I used to rent out my suite and I'm no longer, it's no longer worth the headache to do it. I don't need the extra $1,500 a month because the tenancy laws are like impossible to remove tenants. And the BC government's, as you know, has proposed legislation to make them more punitive to get rid of tenants. So instead of 2 months notice, it's become 4 months notice. If you're kicking them out to occupy it as your primary residence, it used to be you have to live in it for 6 months. Now it's going to be 12 months. It's like, it just keeps going. And like, I feel like for every action, there's a reaction. And I just feel like so much of these policy measures over the last 3, 4, 5 years is just, where's it gotten us? I mean, housing affordability is just even worse.
And if that keeps happening and people don't have the incentive to do it as the people out there that actually own the real estate, it's like, well, what does the future look like? Are the rental options just going to be owned by the government or big corporations? Is that not kind of where we're heading? If we're making it so one-sided that like you're basically telling investors, like, let alone the whole capital gains and all the other stuff happening, like, you can do it, but we're going to make it difficult for you. And at the end, I don't even know if the benefit's worth it anymore. The risk that you're taking.
Yeah, for sure. And then like also like on the BC side, because like we basically have these like strict rent controls where you can only raise the rent like a couple % a year.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like inflation's, the highest it's in the 40 years. Like, cost of maintaining a building is way up, insurance costs way up, mortgage interest costs way up, property taxes way up, but you can raise the rent like, 3%. It's like, oh, great, thanks. And so what you're finding is like tenants now are basically, they're not leaving. So they're just like, I'm like basically rent controlled in this unit. And so there's no turnover. So for the prospective tenants that are out there for looking for product, there's no supply because people just literally don't move. There's no sort of there's no migration. There's no people just sit in these units. And then also when they do eventually leave, the landlord has to like massively jack up those turnover rents. Because you have to know, like, hey, listen, I need to like squeeze this. I need to maximize this to the very utmost top from the start, knowing that I'm going to get rent control moving forward. So like the turnover rent growth is enormous. So like, again, these are all just like these policy measures that have like these unintended consequences. Like the BC government, I think, genuinely means well, but like, man, yeah, it's crazy.
When you hear the stories about even when we had Ravi on the show and he had said something basically like, it's not fair that if someone, has a young kid and then they find out one day that their rent is going up $600 a month. And then one of the comments on that video, so I don't know if you saw, Steve, was like, is it fair that my mortgage is up $1,200 a month? Like, why is it not fair here, but it's fair here just because I own my house versus someone renting? And it's such a tough conversation. Like, there's no good answer to that. It's not fair on either side, but is that not like life? Like in a weird way? Is it like,
and that's the thing, honestly, like I genuinely like, I've met Ravi. I think he's like a nice guy. I think he means well. I think there's well-intentioned there, but it's just like, man, it's just like, you can't run an economy on fairness. Like it's tough. Like life is tough. And everyone's getting squeezed right now.
Yeah. And pull yourself up by your bootstraps wins no elections.
Yeah.
Unless you're in whatever, Argentina or wherever that guy was. Is that where he was? Where he just
yeah.
Everybody out. Get out. Leave. You elect a president and he fires the government the next day.
Oh man. What do you guys think about the on the capital gains side? I've been kind of like toying with this idea in my head. Do you think this really incentivizes people to take larger principal residences? Because it's just like, I think it's anyways, for me, I've been looking at it like, wow, like it really is highlighting the necessity to take advantage of your tax-free shelters, whether that's your TFSA, your RSP, or your primary residence.
That's a really good question. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, if you have money where you could buy your house and an investment, why don't you just buy a bigger house where you're not dinged on it when you sell it?
Totally.
And experience a better overall. And then all the other things with the rent control and whatnot.
It's not only the capital gains, right? It's like all levels of government are saying, listen, we landlords equal bad people. And so everyone's setting policy to like get them out of the marketplace. And so it's like, why are you fighting that? Like, it's almost like, hey, if this is the route that you want to go down, like, I don't want to fight against that. So maybe just take the extra dollar.
If the current government is the one that writes the 2026 budget, you might see that capital gains exemption on your principal residence take a hike as well.
I feel like that'd be the final death knell, though. I feel like
if we're not at the death nail already, like they got to be the heck out of here, right? Like at some point, everybody gets frustrated enough to vote him out. We don't vote him in here, right? We vote him out in Canada. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's what happened with Stephen Harper. Everybody just got sick of him. So we were like, okay, I guess that guy. The next guy, I don't know. And that's what we're going to do this time. But
that was like Christy Clark in BC. It was everyone's just like, oh, like we just, it wasn't that they liked like NDP John Horgan. It was just like Christy Clark's 16 years in power, and everyone was just tired of her.
Yeah, that's exactly the way it's going to go. And I think that at some point, if we keep going down this road, it will be anybody that owns property is the wealthy. So now we have to tax their capital gain. So they'll actually.
I could see that, but I still feel like that's like 20 years away.
Could be. That's why you have to sell your principal residence every 5 years between now and then, so you don't get smashed too hard.
That's been like one of the largest like wealth drivers that I've seen in the real estate market. Like people that actually like play that system is like find a crappy property, roll up your sleeves, put some sweat equity into it, fix it up, redo a bathroom, update the kitchen, flip it in 5 years, make $300,000 tax free.
24 months. Don't do it in 24 months. Not in BC.
Yeah. You know what I mean? But like that's been you just keep rolling that equity over into the new property.
Mm-hmm. I got two final questions for you here. I saw you share a chart, and I don't fully understand what it means, so I'd love if you could break this down. It basically showed just like the job creation, where public versus private sector, and it was all out of whack. I think Fo shared it too, or maybe both of you did. Can you explain to our audience and me, like, is it just showing that this isn't good because most of the country is going to government funded jobs, and then that long term is not a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, like basically, like Bank of Canada governor, she was most recently out saying, we have a productivity emergency. We got to break the glass, and so like, government workers don't produce anything, right? Like it's just a bureaucratic system that actually ends up getting in the way and slowing things down. It's like, where you get productivity and growth is through like new business, entrepreneurs, brainstorming how to make things better and hiring people. So like if you have a country that is just adding more, CRA workers to collect taxes, like that doesn't make anyone better off. What makes people better off is when you have, Shopify starting up here and growing, and a new tech business that starts up, an AI business, like, and I'll take a stab at myself. Yeah, realtors, we aren't overly productive.
I was waiting for that one. Yeah,
yeah. I'll put my hands up. Like we're not overly productive. There's too many of us, especially for you guys in Toronto. But in general, like you want to see an economy, obviously that's starting businesses. And again, I still look back at this capital gain stuff, and it's just like this is sending the exact wrong message.
Opposite.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Shopify, because the CEO or founder, creator of Shopify, whoever it was, came out strongly opposing it, and as did our most recent past finance minister of the Liberal government. So it's interesting that you can have the Bank of Canada say we have a productivity problem, and the government's first reaction is to go, cool, let's squash it a little bit further right now. Let's just see if we can just get all that productivity out of here.
Well, then they hired Stephen Pullos, the ex-Bank of Canada governor. So the finance minister, Christopher Freeland, hired Stephen Pullos to do an investigation into how to get more of our own pension funds to invest in Canadian companies. And it's like, well,
Make the returns worse. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so if I'm listening to all this, and Ontario is very similar to BC with all the rules and everything, we don't have rent control of buildings after 2019, but basically everything else is the same at this point. And I'm like, okay, but I do want to invest in real estate, but I want to have let's use that word fair again, a fair shot at this. Is it too late for Calgary, or is it still humming along regardless of rates?
It feels a bit toppy to me, truthfully. Here's what I will say is, like, if you're going to go do something there, please don't buy Calgary pre-con. I know there's a lot of Toronto guys that are,
but all the Toronto agents say it's great, man.
Yeah, don't buy pre-con. Calgary is a city that can expand. There's lots of land. They don't have the same geographical constraints. They're a city that is prone to, in boom times, they will overbuild. And so don't be surprised in 3 years if we're talking about rents declining, because it does. It's a boom and bust sort of city. And so, I think if you're going to go and invest there and you're like a long-term player, I would just encourage you to buy land in the inner city. Go buy a detached house in the inner city of Calgary. Don't go buy a condo in the outskirts where, like I said, Calgary just sprawls. So as soon as things get expensive, they just find a parcel of land to build on.
I will actually share my experience with that because I just spoke to a client this week that moved there 3 years ago. So I've helped him in a couple of houses in the Lower Mainland. At one point, he went out to Abbotsford, bought for, I want to say 2016, maybe he bought for like $800K in Abbotsford, sold it for like 1.3 3 years ago. He moved to Calgary. He bought for $825. He just sold that exact same house for $300,000 more 3 years later.
He got some good timing worked in there.
Yeah, he's got horseshoes. Yeah. And now he's just, for personal reasons, he's moving to Regina and looking at an acreage for $700,000. So I'm going to tell you, this client of mine has made massive amounts of money. So I'm telling you, leading indicator, Regina is your next market move.
I was going to say that thing's worth $1 million.
Oh my God. If that Regina one goes to $1 million, I'm going to be worried.
The housing bubble just keeps drifting to wherever prices are lowest.
Steve, that was fun, man. Thank you for joining us again. Knew this would be a fun conversation, and we got a little political, but I think we were all reasonable with our responses on everything. I know you don't need to pitch what you do. Everybody knows who you are, but you got the podcast every single week, the Loonie Hour. If you're not following Steve on Twitter, you absolutely must. Obviously, YouTube. You got a newsletter. Am I missing anything? Is there anywhere that
no, man? Yeah, you covered all that. It sounds like
MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace. No, tons of content. Obviously, super passionate about it. Still, people ask me all the time. How do you have time for all this content? Do you sell real estate? Still selling real estate 7 days a week. Got a full team here. So, we work predominantly in the city of Vancouver. But yeah, if you're just looking for the content side of it, Twitter's probably some of the best stuff. And I like the Substack. Substack's underrated.
And how that's coming out weekly?
Yeah, it comes out every Monday morning, and it's probably a 3 to 4 minute read. And I think it helps you. I think when you write, it just helps you like crystallize all your thoughts on a piece of paper. So I'm pretty passionate about that one.
Are you sitting down every Sunday and that's your Zoom time?
Yeah, it's a routine. Yeah. I write it every Sunday. It probably takes me about an hour 15, and just schedule it out for Monday morning, 5 a.m. And it's like I said, it's interesting just to see like the policymakers and stuff that are on there, and hopefully helping to shape some of the conversation around housing in this country.
Well, I mean, we've got to know each other for the last year and a half now, and it's been cool. You were already well known before, but you've even grown since then. And what you've done with the podcast, I think, is absolutely amazing. Like, we know how hard this is, doing this every week, being consistently. What you guys are doing, the numbers you're pulling in is amazing. So big thumbs up on there.
Likewise, trying to keep up with you guys, but appreciate you having me on, and it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you everybody for watching and listening. We will see you next week. Bye.